Um, so thanks for joining us today for April EVROOM-ZOOM from EV Cincy. My name is Jennifer Zavon, and I manage the EV Cincy initiative for the City of Cincinnati Office of Environment and Sustainability. Looking forward to being your host and moderator for today's conversation. So before we jump in, just going to do a quick shout out to Marie McConnell, Outreach and Organizing Manager with Clean Fuels Ohio / Drive Electric Ohio, for her help with putting together this event. And I'll just go into a quick overview of how our event format usually goes, and then I'll go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. So EVROOM-Zooms are monthly conversations on various EV topics. They're one of the activities that we do under the umbrella of EV Cincy, which is the City of Cincinnati's public outreach and engagement initiative to build awareness around the benefits of electric vehicles. So just a couple of things to note about these conversations. We kind of describe it as a mashup between a webinar, a Zoom meeting, and a podcast. So we'll have some PowerPoints being shared today, but we're going to try to make this a really engaging discussion beyond just like your typical PowerPoint presentation. So we are going to ask that if you can, please make sure that your video is switched on so that everyone can kind of be involved in this conversation with each other. Please, throughout the program, go ahead and drop any questions or comments you have into the chat box. We're going to set aside a good chunk of time to answer your questions and get everybody really engaged in discussion here today. And then finally, please go ahead and mute your microphones whenever you're not speaking, just to block out any background noise. So I will go ahead and introduce our guests for today. We have Michael Peters, CEO and co-founder of eMobility, and Michael Palmer, owner and co-founder of Oggo. So welcome to you both. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this right now. We can all see each other. And yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Michael Peters to take it away and go ahead and share your screen.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. And here we go. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what we've been doing at eMobility. And so for us, we're really focused on the car piece of this. That being said, also very big supporters of initiatives like Vision Zero and reducing the number of cars on the road, which sounds maybe a little bit counterintuitive for a car share company. But, primarily, it's because we need cars. So whether we like cars or not is unfortunately a little bit irrelevant to the story, because based on land use planning and a whole host of other reasons over the last, 60 to 100 years, we really need light duty vehicles like cars. And really, our view is that to tackle mobility problems, cars do need to be integrated into the fabric of the transportation ecosystem. And so while, many cities like Cincinnati have a great public transit system, have access to bike share, scooter share, things like that, many parts are very walkable. There are still things that you need a car for. And so we felt that this was one of the big gaps in the mobility spectrum. And so that's what we're setting out to solve. And we do that in a couple different ways. So public car share. So you might think of a zip car or something along those lines as a public car share option. Private car share, where it's more of a dedicated use or to a limited audience or group. And then fleet sharing, which is where the cars serve a double, or at least a double purpose, right? So they might be used by a government agency or a business or something along those lines during the day, but then go to supplement typically a public car share fleet on nights and weekends. So just really increasing utilization for both uses. Our program, we're based in Cleveland, and our program grew out of a need that we saw here in Cleveland, which was the fact that we have many residents paying a higher percentage of their income on transportation than they do on housing. Certainly not a unique problem to Cleveland. Many places in the Midwest, this is the case. And, one, obviously that seems wrong, but two, it seemed like a problem that could be addressed. And so we started to have conversations. This is a partnership I'm going to talk about in a couple slides, but really just trying to address issues like this, right? So this is, the Saturday commute of a real person in the Detroit-Troy neighborhood of Cleveland, who to get to her call center job in Solon ends up taking 3 buses in an hour and a half. Now, fortunately, during the week, it's a much better commute, but on weekends, and there are other use cases where we do have these very long journeys. For people to be able to maximize their income, they have to go through things like this. And so looking to address, a whole host of, spatial mismatch problems, like trying to get people to jobs, but also just trying to get people to the grocery store, to the job interview to begin with, and things like that. And so we do that through a turnkey car share solution. We kind of refer to this as the box, right? So the box is everything you need in it. It's got a car, it's got insurance, it's got the technology, the software, the hardware, the maintenance, and everything. So basically, once we are collaborating with a client or a group of stakeholders, the logo of the program or that client goes on the car. It's not our logo, and we kind of take care of everything else, even to the extent of producing marketing content for their social media channels. And so, we have a really big focus on quality of life car share. So, the way that we view it is that the first generation of car share, which plays a very valuable role in the transportation ecosystem. So the places, so companies like Zipcar, like Car2Go when it was here, Maven when it was here, are kind of that first generation, which was more focused on lifestyle. So more geared towards people and drivers who had the choice to make in their mobility options. In our version of CarShare 2.0, we're focused a little bit more on the equity piece and quality of life issues. And so I just want to share some examples of that, just to start to think about ways that this could be applied in Cincinnati. So the first one is 2 different pilots that we're involved in through the Paradox Prize, which was the paradox being the spatial mismatch between where jobs are and where people live. And so this is something that we're doing with an organization called the Fund for Economic Future, which is a nonprofit here in the Cleveland area. And so we have 2 different programs with them. One is the Career Navigation Program, which is with the Regional Transit Authority, the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, so our public transit system in Northeast Ohio, and the Centers for Families and Children, which is a fairly large nonprofit that kind of took a couple nonprofits and put them together. So it was formerly the Free Clinic, an early childhood education program, a job training program. And so that's the piece that we're working with, which is called El Barrio, which is a workforce training program. And so participants in that program get access to car share, they get transit passes, and we're constantly collaborating with them, talking to them, surveying them to figure out ways to help them not only get to jobs in a better way, and not to just get the vocational training they need, but also for these quality of life issues and the social determinants of health. How do you get to the doctor's appointment? How do you get to the grocery store? Things like that. The second one on the right is a program in Lorain County, which is with Catholic Charities and the St. Elizabeth Men's Homeless Shelter, and something called Place to Recover, which is also a job training and resource center. And so they share a car that is used by a combination of their participants, so the people at the homeless shelter, the people who are in the job training program, as well as their staff who help those people get around and get to jobs, especially second and third shift jobs, which are not very well served by the limited public transportation in Lorain County, which is more of a rural county. The next one is Oberlin. So the city of Oberlin, also in Lorain County, is a college town of about 6,000 that has a climate action plan. And part of their climate action plan is to bring greater awareness of electric vehicles to their community. And so we have a collaborative effort with them where we have car share cars and chargers that are a combination of car share charging and public charging. So about triple the number of public charging ports in the city of Oberlin. And this is a program that is available to any resident of the city of Oberlin and students at Oberlin College and Conservatory, who I'll tell you use the cars a lot. And then there is, workforce and student housing. River and Rich is a apartment complex in the Franklinton neighborhood of Columbus, so in central Ohio. So Franklinton is a low and moderate income community, although it's gentrifying pretty rapidly. And River and Rich has a 20% workforce housing component. And so we have a car that is supporting their tenants there. And then on the right is a new micro unit, kind of very small apartment complex in the city of Cleveland, and working with a developer there. So this will go into service in August, but there we're doing what we're calling a mobility amenity package, which is a combination of car share, electric assist bicycles, and transit passes. So every unit basically gets a monthly allocation of all of these forms of mobility. And the hope is to reduce car ownership and vehicle miles traveled, but also give people some additional choices in their transportation options. And then finally, some of the stuff that is either upcoming or we're continuing to do. So we've been working with Smart Columbus for a long time and continue to work with them on some upcoming programs. We were just selected to participate in Michigan Central's Accessible Streets program. So we'll be doing some car share in the city of Detroit in collaboration with them and Ford's new innovation center. And we're working with a group in Indiana to do something we're calling a mobility innovation district. And so this would be much like a business improvement district or special improvement district with some, shades of a transit management association. Where the hope is, and it'll take a little while, but once we get there, is that commercial property owners within the district will voluntarily contribute to a multi-year fund that will bring mobility innovation. So we'll basically bring more modes of transportation into the district. And that's it, and that's me. So if you have any questions, obviously here for the duration, but feel free to reach out to me on email as well. So thanks very much, Jennifer. That's what I have.
Thanks, Michael. And we do have some extra time since we were originally going to have 3 presenters. So I feel like we might as well get into a couple of questions that Harold asked that are relevant to your presentation. Harold, feel free to come off mute if you want to kind of bring yourself into the discussion, and yeah, go for it.
Okay, well, I guess I forgot my questions already, but I guess what I wanted to know is what EVs do you provide in these with Sway Mobility?
Yeah, so everything that we've done so far has been the Chevy Bolt, mostly because it's a super utilitarian car while still very fun to drive. That being said, the technology we use can really work on any EV. It just so happens that, for kind of a host of reasons, we've used the Chevy Bolt so far.
Okay, good. And then I think my second question was, do you have any customers or contracts in the, I think it's called, oh gosh, I forgot the name of the place now. It's outside, Euclid, Ohio. It's outside of Cleveland.
So I actually grew up in Euclid, Ohio. Go Panthers. No, so we do not yet. Although, potentially working on something, and I know that the city of Euclid is making a lot of progress on their sustainability initiatives. And so, that being my hometown, would certainly love to be. So we have been in contact with Euclid and hope to do something there in the future.
Okay, good. And I actually have one more question for you, and that is with your contracts that you have, I've noticed that some people share a car, and then some people, I guess you said some people drive other people. Is that what I heard right?
So in one of the Paradox Prize programs, that is correct. So that car is being used by both the staff at those social service agencies as well as the participants in those programs. And that's really being done because, while we're trying to figure out ways to get people to jobs, just taking a car to a job and letting it sit there for 8 hours isn't great for utilization. And so, look, there's no one, magic answer to solve all of our mobility problems. Wish there was, but there isn't. And so this is, I think one way to start chipping away at some of those needs, but is not a perfect solution for commuting. And so one of the ways that they're doing it is making the car available to the participants mostly during the day when people, want to go to the grocery store or the doctor or things like that. And then using it for second and third shift jobs. And that's where they're using their staff to kind of drop people off and pick them up. And as, hopefully the pandemic restrictions ease, they'll be able to do that with more than one person, right? So the ideal would be, get 2 or 3 people in a car and take them to a job site, something along those lines.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the questions.
Awesome, thanks, Harold. And any other questions for Michael specifically? And if not, we can go ahead and move to our next presenter, Michael Palmer with OGO.
All right, let me get this teed up. All right, is everybody seeing the my screen here? Awesome. All right, well, thanks. Yeah, I'm Palmer, one of the founders of OGO. You can see on this slide, my business partner, Dustin Grutza, is my co-founder. And we really started this company to help there's challenges that every city and every campus, every dense urban area has, and it has to do with traffic and the expense of driving, parking, pollution. And we felt that electric vehicles and the technology surrounding them and a platform to enhance how you access those was a key solution, and how cities in the future can get more involved in becoming part of the solution, while giving people what they expect, which today anymore, people are much more interested in point to point, and they're looking for, as we all see, this shift into electric vehicles. So what OGO does, it's really a platform that helps connect micromobility and helps connect people to micromobility and navigate these dense urban landscapes. Historically, what we've done is had a rideshare service connected to the technology, very similar to any other point-to-point app, and that's kind of what everybody's used to, and kind of how we've done that in a closed loop kind of footprint. And so the difference is, as you'll see as we go through this, is really how OGO and the app take, the network and the community, that closed loop community, tether that to that group of people, and allow for them to communicate, allow for the platform to inform them, showcase what's going on around a city, and also local businesses, brands, and other people kind of get in on the action. And that's how you're able to kind of offer this service at a deeply discounted price and make it much more approachable and much more appealing to a wider net. And what that can also link into, what we're showing here, is more smart city applications. So many cities are starting to get these kind of kiosks and smart city kind of free Wi-Fi around their municipalities, and OGO can kind of interact with that, where what goes on in the screens in the cars, what happens on the smart screens in the city, all that can kind of start to communicate and talk to each other. So historically what we've done is we offer, it's a safer solution to kind of what a normal rideshare program looks like, because it's a closed loop. It works within a footprint, and it has dedicated drivers who are vetted and become part of that community's fabric. And so in Cincinnati, what we were able to do is work with the city police. We were working with an organization called Green Dot, which is basically kind of like a see something, say something program to do with violence, and as well as working with places like the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And so these drivers are out and about in the city all day, every day, and they really become part of the network of what's going on there. They communicate to new people to town, help them understand like what's going on and how to navigate the city. They help people who live and breathe in the city all day, every day, get around, get to work, get to run errands, that kind of thing. And they become part of that. They become part of that community network. Obviously, we're all here partially because of the sustainability benefits of electric vehicles. And the cars that we were running with in Cincinnati are Polaris Gems, which have a small, nimble footprint, but pack a lot of punch. They were able to carry 5 passengers plus the driver. And so we were moving a lot of folks around town pretty quietly, pretty seamlessly, and saving a lot of pollution in the urban landscape. And then, the other part about it is they become, especially when we were using a car that's as disruptive as that Polaris, when you see that in the landscape of typical traffic in a typical city, it becomes a much more disruptive thing that people kind of jumped onto. We also went through a lot of bells and whistles with like adding LED lights and making sure that there was like good music options, as well as the interactive touchscreens on the inside. And it really became a fun, in personalized point-to-point experience that people could kind of get, have fun with and navigate, especially when it comes to those kind of like Thursday, Friday, Saturday night times. So, like any of the other rideshare apps, it's a point-to-point solution. But what we did that makes it unique and makes it much more interactive is we embedded a lot more about, recommendations. We intermingle some of our partners, so some of the local businesses and some of the other advertisers into that footprint, so that they're able to start to communicate, get a sense of what's going on. There's event programming. There's favorite destinations, there's things like that. So it becomes a little bit more of a informative device that helps kind of get into everybody's pocket. And whether you're new to town or you live there, it's just kind of reminders in ways to kind of interact with what's going on in that community. And it's also a way for local businesses and other businesses to reward people for being a part of that community and make offers and do that kind of thing. So what, again, I focus a lot on how this thing becomes a real big part of the community, and this kind of helps demonstrate that. So obviously on the outside, the cars are big, high visibility, dense, kind of mini billboards, and we're able to offset the cost of the overall expense of the operation by offering that to brands as a way to get their word out inside of a city. On the inside is more of that digital kiosk that we were talking about, that has maps, that has advertising, that has community events, that has all the kind of stuff in there, and it gives people something to interact with as they're on their ride. And the community aspect is really like, as we were operating in Cincinnati for the time, it was, we were getting involved in everything, because people wanted us to be there, and two, the beauty of this fleet of vehicles is that you could move it to wherever the density was and wherever the need was. So for example, in that picture there, taking part in the Pride Parade, or, if it's game day for one of the sports events, we were always kind of floating around there, taking part really in anything, whether it's a farmer's market or something going on at Washington Park, or any of the things we were involved, including a major play driving across the Roebling Bridge for the big Blink Festival. And then lastly, this integration into the smart charging stations and smart charging kiosks, where you can really tie our screens to those screens and create a closed network that really helps people navigate the city when they're inside of an OGO or not. Some more pictures of what that kind of community engagement looks like, and showing up in the city and being really part of what's happening. And this all, like I mentioned, the offset of costs. So like, by having this platform, we have tons and tons of data. We have a number of active users. We have a social campaign that goes along with that. We have an email campaign that goes along with that. And we have a lot of data on when people are showing up, where they're going, how many people are riding on what day in any given day. And that's extremely valuable to the municipality, but it's also extremely valuable to local businesses and other networks. And so as a trade-off, we talk about having them invest a lot of capital into OGO, and that helps make the cost for users significantly less than any of your, it's basically cheaper than public transportation, definitely cheaper than Uber, Bird, any of those kind of things. Again, another visualization that kind of shows that connectivity and how it can tie into smart cities. And that's about it. So that's an introduction to OGO.
Thanks, Palmer. So we're going to kind of move into the Q&A, a larger Q&A. I'll start out with some general questions for both of our presenters. And we also have a couple of good questions from audience members that we can move into as well. But the question that we kind of like to start out with is very like general get to know you question about how you kind of got into electric vehicles, or in this case, kind of just could you share a little bit about your background and your pathway to starting a company that was focused on e-mobility?
Michael, you want to go first?
Sure. So I have probably not the typical background. So I was an investment banker for 20 years, but the last several years of that was focused on sustainability. So I was, working on the financing side to bring sustainable projects to fruition. So maybe it's not that far afield, but really, you know, started in moving back to Cleveland. So I grew up in Cleveland, left for a long time, came back, and in moving back, really wanted to focus on sustainability. And for me, this was, you know, one way to do that. And you know, when we decided to start to tackle a transportation and mobility challenge, it was very easy to focus exclusively on EVs. I mean, certainly, you know, coming from the sustainability side, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, but really from the business side too, right? So, you know, I think there's been lots of conversations lately, and, you know, we've found all these to be true in running a fleet of EVs, which is, you know, our costs are 3 to 4 cents a mile, you know, versus a gasoline car at 9 to 12 cents a mile. We've had very, very little maintenance, right? So huge cost savings on the maintenance side. And frankly, where the incentives are right now, you know, the last Chevy Bolt that we bought before sales tax was just under $20,000, right? So I mean, basically it was half off of the sticker price on the car. So, you know, being able to reduce your capital costs, reduce your operating costs, reduce your maintenance costs, I mean, it's just, you know, no question as to why we would go with EVs.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So I mean, yeah, for me, you know, I think we got involved. One being just very active in the downtown community, and I actually, at the time that we started kind of with the project, I had been doing some work in other cities that got me seeing kind of the similar problem happening, you know, everywhere, and really just kind of putting 2 and 2 together, seeing a bunch of different things happening, saying like this is a major opportunity and a major gap in the transportation footprint. And then as people's perceptions were changing again, you started to see like the expectation of more point to point, the expectation that more on demand style service was really, really like growing, and it just seemed like an opportunity. And then again, to try to continue to stay ahead of it and stay ahead of the curve, EVs was the solution, because it was fighting all these density issues and all these overall just kind of city issues. And as being somebody that was always in and around the city, it's something that I was like seeking and yearning myself. So kind of wanted to jump in and be part of that active solution.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Palmer. And yeah, I think it's it's really cool to see how like both of your companies are meeting these different needs that are really especially relevant in cities. We had a couple questions from audience members on OGO and the charging station. So Harold asked about OGO, if you're using the Volta charging stations with ads. Did you want to speak to that?
I had this popped up. I see a couple of them. So yeah, so basically sort of stole the Volta as a footprint because I liked what they were doing and we liked the look and the feel of it. But we actually have a partnership with SmartLink in Cincinnati, who has been putting in these smart city kiosks kind of around the country. And they already have that technology. So that technology is actually what fuels the inside of our kiosk inside the car. And so it was a kind of a no-brainer to start making that partnership outside of the car and making that connectivity outside of the car. So we have some prototype stuff in development there. And the idea would be that the smart charging station isn't exclusive for OGO. It's more that they're around the municipality, the campus, or the location that OGO is operating as a service to the community. And that OGO would just be tethered into that. So again, it's about, like Michael was saying in his scenario, there's no one size fits all solution. And there's still foot traffic, and there's still need to like jump in a ride share. And this helps kind of bridge the gap and connect all that together. And that's why we really like the idea of tethering into these fixed kiosks in the city.
Cool. Yeah, and we also had a couple of questions about OGO and the situation with COVID, asking about,
Sure.
yeah.
So, I mean, deeply affected by COVID, and definitely, we were already in the process, as somebody called out, we have an app that's basically redeveloped and done, and we were almost to that point where we're about to launch that and start rolling that out when everything kind of went sideways. And unfortunately, we talked a lot about how marketing funds helps fund what was going on in COVID, or what was going on with OGO. COVID had a major impact on marketing dollars and marketing spend. And so that was a big one. It was a big alert to us on how OGO needs to happen in the future. And two, it definitely hurt us from continuing to operate anywhere. So at current moment, like what was happening right as we were starting OGO, or as COVID started, we were actually in the process of we're getting close to like contracts with some campuses and some municipalities where they step in and they become part of the funding as well. And so we were really trying to create the bridge between user funding, which is what the OGO app was going to have, where people would start paying for some portion for rides, because we found that the ridership has to have a buy-in as well, just so they have ownership and so they have responsibility. And then we were looking for the municipality and campuses to take part in funding. And then the third leg was going to continue to be marketing. And what we're trying to do is, diversify across those three, so that if any one gets kind of pushed sideways, that it still has enough to keep going. And that was a major, unexpected learning from what happened with COVID. And so that's where we are still today, is we have everything kind of sitting on the table, and we're in dialogue with some municipalities and some campuses to find a new home to kind of start, pulling out OGO closed loops in other areas.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for getting into a little bit of that situation. I'm curious to also know from Michael, what was the experience like during COVID for Sway?
Yeah, it was, in those very early days, I think a lot of people will probably recall, there were a lot of unknowns, right? And one of those unknowns was whether the virus could be transmitted on surfaces. Now, as it turns out, while it can, it's pretty unlikely, but we didn't know that at that time. And so we took about 3 months to kind of figure out our COVID protocols. Which included, we already obviously, clean the cars. Now we can't clean the cars after every use, right? Like a traditional rental car company does. But we increased the frequency of cleaning the cars. We introduced, chemical fogging to the cars for disinfection. We put, as much as I hated to do it, being a sustainability person, we put disposable steering wheel covers in the cars, which I think was purely a psychological thing because nobody ever used them. We have hand sanitizer in the cars. Some of the cars, now that we're able to get them again, some of the cars have wipes too. But so really tried to increase the awareness of our users. One, that there was no guarantee that the car had just been disinfected before you got in. But two, these are the steps that you can take to protect yourself. And by the way, wear a mask. And fortunately, and not to jinx us, hopefully, but fortunately, we've never had any reports of, COVID positive people using the cars or, being diagnosed shortly after using them. But, we continue to do all those disinfection things and continue to put sanitizer in the car. And I think, those will just be standard protocol going forward. So I think, what it probably did was accelerate just some of those things that we probably would have gotten to at some point, and that now will be a permanent part of our operations.
Thank you. I wanted to give also the audience opportunities to come off mute, ask other questions if you have them. So definitely go ahead and do that. I can continue to ask questions, but we do want to make it kind of, an engaging discussion for you all. So wanted to make that space for you.
I do have a question. For OGO, for their vehicle, I know it's a closed loop system. Does that closed loop include the freeway, or is this type of vehicle not able to go on freeways?
No, we were always running low-speed vehicle loops, and so like our focus was always more last mile and highly dense areas. So most of our partnerships that we've been in conversation about are on college campuses, in college like hospital areas, as well as like dense kind of city centers. But even to a certain extent, still dense, but like slightly, you know, just outside of like core downtown areas have started to like pop up more and more, where people are, you know, somewhat COVID related, I guess, are trying to stay a little closer to home a little more frequently.
Well, I actually took an Oggo ride, not sure which way you pronounce it, pre-COVID, and actually got in trouble because I just happened to see the Oggo cars sitting there and went over and asked for a ride, and they explained, oh, you kind of blew it. You're supposed to call for the ride with an app. So I learned about that, but it was great chatting with the driver, and the vehicle was, you know, comfortable. So it was a good experience.
I'm glad to hear they took you anyway.
Yeah, they did. It's like, you didn't do it right, but we'll take you anyway, you know. So that was great. And so are you actually up and running now? And then what is the service area that you're doing currently? You mentioned maybe adding some more municipalities, maybe adjacent ones, I guess, in the future. But what are you actually running now?
So we haven't started back up since COVID yet. And that's where, like I said, I think we're trying to find a partner in a municipality, and we think that it's increasingly important, similar to how Michael is partnering with a lot of local organizations and people that have a need and that can leverage some of their resources and assets to make sure that they're bringing things to the community. We think that buy-in on a community level is just as important for this, like for the overall sustainability of an option like this to survive. And so that's where we're trying to solidify partnerships with city, with campuses. And so those are all ongoing conversations at the moment. It's been you know, we were deep into some conversations right before COVID. And then that happened and really put a stall on a lot of things. So we're looking forward to getting something shored up and rolling again soon, especially now that things are starting to break free with vaccines, but have not thus far.
So when you start up again, it might not be even in Cincinnati.
That is a fact.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I feel like there's often, like with anything, we're talking about anything with electric vehicles, kind of a learning curve for consumers. And then when you bring in these business models of shared mobility, and it's like entirely different systems than people might be used to using or be aware of, it kind of can elevate that to another level as well. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the challenges that you both face when you're introducing your business model to, you know, individual consumers or partners, potential partners, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have, you know, I think both of our business models share some similarities. And one of those is a similarity that we share with public transit, which is, you know, user fees, fare box revenue does not cover the cost of the service. I think most people are shocked to know that, you know, the $2 or $2.50 or whatever they put into the bus turnstile, right, you know, doesn't cover the cost of the bus. But it's, you know, I think on average in the US, only about 25% of the operating costs for public transit. And, you know, I would say, you know, we're in a similar situation. So that's why, you know, for all of our deployments, you know, we do have partners. And so, you know, they pay a subscription fee. So whether that's, you know, the apartment complex or the city or the nonprofit, or there's basically a subscription fee that helps to effectively subsidize that service. Subsidize is not my favorite word, but it's effectively what it is. But, you know, there is the prospect of economic sustainability. It comes with utilization, right? And so because we are such a car-dependent society, especially in much of the Midwest, and that it's really, frankly, cheap and convenient to use a car, you know, it's hard to get people out of their cars. And so, you know, there is a point of utilization, which is a very reasonable amount of utilization, where these programs do become economically sustainable, but it's going to take a while to get there. And so we really view a lot of these as kind of gap funding to get there, although that gap is going to be a couple of years in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, that's nail on the head for some similar to the same as how we feel as far as we actually had no issues with perception in ridership and people wanting to adopt it. And actually most of the feedback was in regard, like similar to what Gary's comment was, like people had loved getting in the cars. They loved riding in the cars. They asked questions about them being electric. They were thrilled with the fact that it was electric. You know, our thing, it really didn't have a whole lot to do with the fact that it was electric. It was really the service that you're providing, and the electric was just an added benefit. And so that is exactly right. Like, until you get overall adoption or enough people kind of crowdfunding it, there's always going to be a deficit to the cost of these things. And especially in a closed loop environment like we were trying to create, we're trying to train drivers. We're trying to make sure that drivers are reasonably paid and making a good earning wage, and to build the right type of team so that you get the right type of service. And so it's really about finding ways, and I agree with you. I don't necessarily like the word subsidize, finding your partners to invest in. And honestly, even prior to COVID, we didn't have a whole lot of trouble getting a large brand like Absolute Vodka to understand the value of it. And they bought all 5 cars right out of the gate, and we're happy to do it because the visibility, the exposure to the audience, all that kind of stuff was important to them. The problem is you need multiple sources of people investing in it. And so it's like, that's where it's the audience and the ridership has to invest in it. The city where you're running or the campus where you're running needs to be a partner in it. And then you can go and find these other outside partners that help make it all happen.
Thanks, Palmer. We have another question from Harold on for Michael about Sway. Whether did Sway work with retirement homes, condo complexes, and then asking also about Sway Electric putting in EV chargers.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we do have a division that does just do charging. So we do charging obviously for our car share deployments, but we do charging independently of that just for charging clients. So retirement homes is a really interesting one because we spent a whole bunch of time and actually worked with a tier 1 automotive manufacturer on aging and mobility. And we thought it would be brilliant to have these cars at, assisted living and places like that. Because, one of the big challenges as people age is running out of money. And so if they can get rid of a very big expense like a car, right, which on average costs, according to AAA, about $9,000 a year to have a private car, we thought that would be great. So we spent a bunch of time, interviewed a whole bunch of people who run these assisted living and retirement homes. And what we found is that, especially increasingly, is that people wait until the absolute last minute to go into a retirement home. They try to stay home as long as possible. One operator told us that it's on average 2 years from the time someone first looks at an assisted living facility until the day they move in. And that is often driven by an injury. That basically they have no choice but to move in. And so unfortunately, what we found is that pool of able drivers is pretty low at that point. And so while we did spend a lot of time looking at that, and I still think that there probably is some opportunity there, that became a little bit of a lower priority after that due diligence.
And I believe the other part of the question was, wait, did you already address the EV chargers?
Yeah, so we
Okay.
do EV charging as well. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's see. Okay, so another question for Michael is, could you speak a little bit to the benefits and challenges of car sharing, whether that it could be electric cars or bikes or scooters, using designated parking versus centralized pickup and drop-off points?
Is that for me or Michael Palmer?
Oh, yeah, I guess it was for you. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. So the question is, so basically, I mean, to me, this sounds like something that we've talked a lot about with a number of people, which is this concept of a mobility hub, right? So basically, if one of our goals, which it is to get people out of their private vehicles, how do we do that, right? So in addition to all the other things that need to happen, like places becoming more walkable, one of the things is giving people the confidence that they're going to be able to get to where they're going, right? So if I want to go somewhere and I have a car, I know I can get there generally. If I don't, or if I choose not to use my car, then it becomes a matter of, how critical is it for me to be on time to this trip and how can I get there? And so, and this is where the Europeans are, at least a generation ahead of us, but, this concept of having a major public transit stop or multiple stops, car share, bike share, curb cut for ride hailing like Uber and Lyft, scooters, bikes, kind of the whole thing. And, what that does is gives people the confidence that one, there will be a vehicle there for them. Maybe they, wanted a scooter and it's just a bike or, something like that, but there will be a scooter or a bike or, some means for them once they're there. But two is also just the ease of using those. How do you reduce the friction between going from one mode to another? And so, this is where, mobility as a service kind of comes in, something that Columbus is, I think ahead of everyone else in the state in doing in terms of their Pivot app. But how do you give people the ability to not only plan the trip, but pay for the trip in kind of one easy and convenient way? And so that's something that we've been spending a lot of time, working on and trying to integrate and figure out. And I think we'll get there in relatively short order, but I think it's the trend for the entire industry. And I think, like anything, once we start to see some momentum in one part of the country, it'll happen a lot more. But did that answer the whole question? There were a couple different parts there.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And I know Marie also mentioned in the chat about getting people out of cars. Let's see. With OGO being movable to big events, diverting car trips would be a big part of that. But being curious about services like Sway and OGO filling transportation needs and granting mobility to people that might not otherwise have that. So if either of you would want to speak to that question a little bit more, or if Marie, you want to come off mute and speak to it more as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people on this call today are pretty lucky to have their own vehicles and to maybe not have had transportation needs. So I was hoping that you guys could kind of humanize that, and maybe some use cases that you've seen or examples where services like this are really kind of making an impact in people's daily lives and routines.
Yeah, I mean, I can just, quickly give some, anecdotal stuff. And this is really driven a lot by the Paradox Prize work that we're doing, which is, really focused on this. And so, what we're seeing is that, so for example, with the career navigation program, one of the goals was to take a more holistic view of how to help someone be successful, right? So you can give someone vocational training, and that's great, right, to help them get a job. But if they can't get to the doctor, or they can't get to the grocery store because they're working so late or a different, shift or things like that, those have a very pretty well-defined impact on their ability to maintain that job. And so, I think the fact that social service agencies and, others are starting to think about the transportation aspects of, being successful in, our other aspects of life and the social determinants of health is great. It's a really big step forward. I would say the other thing that we're really encouraged by is, some of the state agencies that allocate low-income housing tax credits are also starting to look at the cost of transportation as part of the overall cost of living, and are starting to address that in how they're allocating those low-income housing tax credits. So basically, if a developer starts to incorporate things like car share or bike share or access to service like Michael Palmer's, that project would score more highly in that allocation of credits. And so I think, taking this more holistic approach is really beneficial. But I think it also starts to make people think about, what the cost of transportation is. And I don't think most people think that they spend $9,000 a year in a car, right? Because most people who have the privilege of having that car don't sit down at the end of the year and add up all their, gas bills and insurance and all that stuff, right? So I think it's really healthy that this is starting to permeate the conversation. But I'll turn it over to Michael Palmer.
Yeah, thanks. No, I mean, and that's like, I think we had a lot of anecdotes of folks who were using it because they didn't have other options, and the other options, as Michael called out in his slide, can often be cumbersome or lengthy or just not nearly as enjoyable of an experience. And so we had a ton of ridership, especially in the more day-to-day hours where they were going to the grocery store, they were running, an errand, they were going to and from work, more, your more day-to-day things. And many of those folks were coming from some of the more low income portions of the city. And so and that was a big part of and that gets back to having an overall buoy of ridership, as well as buy-in from different organizations. And we talked to a lot of organizations over the course, and did lots of side events and things like that with some of these organizations to help get people. We were working with Covington to get folks to the farmers market, and that was something we were able to do early on. Just before we would open for our normal day, we would spend an hour shuttling some folks that didn't otherwise have access to the farmers market, things like that. And we're always happy to be. Again, it's part of the community, and that's what makes it successful, and that's what makes it part of that suite of options that help get people around and help move people.
Awesome. Okay, we had one more question in the chat from Shirley about the Orion Bike, and I wanted to also take the opportunity to mention Orion Electronics Company. Our other speaker was originally going to be Paul, the CEO and founder of Orion, but he couldn't make it today. I did want to still shout them out and share the link to their website with you all in the chat. So Orion, for anyone who isn't familiar, they are currently releasing an electric bike, which is available for pre-order, and you can see all of the details on the website. But unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information beyond that. I'm sure Paul would have been able to speak to it so much better. But I can maybe put you in touch with him, Shirley, or try to help you answer that question offline, since he wasn't able to make it today. We did have one more question from Harold about which cities OGO was in before COVID.
So Cincinnati was our main city, and we kind of always considered that our beta. We were there for a year and a half, but we were in discussions with Columbus. We were in discussions with University of Cincinnati, Ohio State. We've spent some time up at Cleveland and Cleveland State, and South Bend and Notre Dame. We've been kind of talking to all those folks, and we're continuing to have dialogue with a lot of those folks on finding a way to partner.
And I think that is probably a good lead in to a question that can kind of wrap this up. I just wanted to say thank you to both Michael Peters and Michael Palmer for coming here and sharing a little bit about what you guys do with us. And just wanted to kind of wrap up by saying, where do you see Sway and OGO going in the next 5 years? And then how can people on this call help to promote e-mobility, whether that's, through what you're doing or in other ways in their communities?
Yeah, so great question, and thank you for that. So, we are very encouraged by the current administration's focus on electric vehicles, and have already, I think, seen some promising signs of what's to come. So, for us, just like with all, mobility solutions, right, scale is really critical. Everyone needs to get their per unit cost down. We do that by having more units. And so, we are very anxious to grow. We would, we're in Northern Ohio, we're in Central Ohio. We would love to be in Southwest Ohio. So, any opportunity to work with stakeholders and collaborators there would be great. We would certainly love that. But I think, what I would say, for everyone is, if you're not already an EV driver, and this is definitely a shout out to Marie, right? Drive Electric Ohio has chapters in every part of the state. There's great ride and drive events that I think will be coming back soon. So, really go out there and experience it. I think there's no better way to really get a sense for what EVs are than, taking one for a short drive. And in the 3+ years that I think, we've been doing ride and drives, we've never had someone get out of an EV and say, "Yeah, that sucked." Right? Like it never happens. So I would really encourage anyone who hasn't had that opportunity to try to do that and just connect with your local Drive Electric chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add there other than you can feel the groundswell of energy and the amount of conversation that's happened around electric vehicles. Locally, nationally, it's kind of everywhere, and you're just starting to see people becoming so much more open to adopting the technology and engaging with it. And it's you kind of got to get on the train, otherwise you're gonna miss your station basically, because it's coming. I think whether people like it or not to a certain degree. And you hear a lot about a lot of big manufacturers switching their gears that way, and so. I think the earlier people jump in, the earlier we get infrastructure in place, the more options that we're able to make that are more available to more people, the better. And it's just gonna be an all-in win, and it's gonna help. Like you mentioned, being behind the ball a little bit with transportation in old world Europe. This is a chance for us to kind of get back on the cusp, I think, and take the lead a little bit again. So that seems like it's happening. I want to just keep pushing and pushing people to kind of adopt early.
Thanks, Palmer, and thanks to Michael Peters as well. Marie also asked a great follow-up question about how can we keep up with what Sway and Oggo are doing.
Yeah, so I should say check our social media feeds, but we're terrible at that, which is why we have an intern coming in to do just that. But so follow our social media, and hopefully we'll actually start posting more.
Are you able to drop those handles in the chat?
I'm assuming there's Sway Mobility.
I can definitely find them and send them to everyone. And thanks, Palmer, for dropping those Oggo handles. And yeah,
yep, that's the best way to see what's going on and hear announcements and sign up. So
awesome. Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming today and contributing to the conversation. Hopefully we didn't have a bigger crowd because like we just mentioned, everyone's out driving their electric cars. So this is how you can stay in touch with us at EV Cincy. From that link, you can sign up for our newsletter if you're not on there already and that's not how you found out about us today. But yeah, just wanted to extend one last thank you to Michael Peters, Michael Palmer, and just everyone here for asking great questions and contributing to the discussion today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.